Start to my far left with a question of what is consciousness. Let's start to my near left with near. What is consciousness near?
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's very hard to define what consciousness is. It's one of those questions that intuitively we know what is it, but then when we try to think about it, how to give it a definition, then we realize it's really hard to do it. So, for example, someone told me today that consciousness should be something like awareness. But then, okay, so what is awareness, right? So every time, it's really hard to get to the bottom of what is it? What are we talking about when we are talking about consciousness? But there is actually let's call it canonical definition that everybody that in consciousness studies use, and this is if there is an answer to the question how is it like, then you have consciousness. So for example, when I look at the apple, I have something that is like to see this apple. Or when I feel happiness, I have something that is like to feel happiness. But when I'm under anesthesia, for example, then for me there's nothing that is like to be, right? I mean, for me it will be 1 second and boom, I'm awake again, right? So I will have nothing that is like to be under anesthesia or to be in deep sleep without any dreams. 1 second. So that's why the definition usually is there something that is like to be for the creature, and it's not about if the creature can tell us. Maybe the creature cannot speak, but still, if the creature has something that is like to be, then it will have consciousness. Okay, so this is more or less the definition here. How come something is light up? How come we can feel ourselves, the world, our thoughts, our feelings? This is consciousness, more or less. You had questions about it, right? Yeah. Right.
Let me repeat her question. It's actually a great question, and it's a widely discussed question. So the point is, I can know that I know what it's like to feel to be me. Sometimes I know this. But how can somebody outside of me ever know that I for sure actually feel something? I could be a robot that's elegantly programmed to fake feeling like something. So that was her question. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, just about the definition. So yeah, I mean, this is the definition. Now we can ask, but how can I know if someone has consciousness or doesn't have consciousness? So this is a great question, but a different one than definition. This is very. I mean, this is a. You can say it's the essence of the mystery of consciousness. But first of all, maybe, I don't know, Daniel, do you want to say something before we go into the mystery of consciousness itself?
One quick thing. With the caveat that I have not slept in a very long time, so I'm exhausted. When we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about lots of different kinds of things. You're talking about phenomenal consciousness. You're talking something more like differences in perspective or differences in subjective, like positionality. Sorry. The thing that I heard was how can you tell what someone else is seeing or feeling? I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, I had a really good example for the thing I thought you said, but it's not going to work now. What I was going to say is I can see the man over there, but I can tell that you can't see the man because I can see what your perspective is on the thing and how it's different from my perspective. So I know that your perspective is different from mine, and I can even maybe infer what you can and cannot see, even though I'm not you. So like there's ways of translating between perspectives, and I think this might be sympathetic to the thing that you're eventually going to do. So that's about the last sympathy you'll get from me here. Okay, great.
Yeah, that's true. Later on, when we speak about my theory, it's very... Oh yeah, right. You have your own, right?
So, Daniel, actually, do you want to try to say something about that question of what is consciousness? I think Nir has sort of said what he wanted to say.
Oh yeah. I should also say I don't work on consciousness. I have not published papers on consciousness. I work on agency and artificial intelligence. I like the word agency a lot better because I think it works well with the perspectival sort of transitions I was just talking about. When we talk about consciousness, I think there's in the literature they talk about phenomenal consciousness versus access consciousness. Access consciousness, it's technical term. Access consciousness is what doctors and scientists usually mean when they talk about consciousness, and it's about being aware. You know, like when the doctor is moving their finger, can your eye follow the finger? It means you're aware of some visual, perceptual input. And this is a kind of consciousness, a kind of awareness. That kind of stuff we actually understand pretty well. Like, we don't know how the brain works, but we understand pretty well how you're able to follow objects in your environment and this kind of stuff. Like from a brain perspective, like all the wiring, that's pretty well understood. But there's this other thing that philosophers have worried about for a long time, phenomenal consciousness, which is this what it's like, which is like the technical term here is qualia. Sort of what does it feel like? The example I use in my classes is the taste of pineapple. So no one here is eating pineapple right now, but you can probably recall the flavor of pineapple and how it's different from the flavor of a mango. And this qualitative sensation, the qualia, the qualitative sensation, is something that you have because you've had that experience, and maybe someone who's never eaten a pineapple, like you couldn't explain to them what it tastes like because they've never had that experience and they don't know what that qualia is. Like you could describe it, you know, it's a tropical fruit, it's tangy, but it's never going to quite get at what it's like for someone who's not had that experience. So this is a qualitative thing, and this is the thing that philosophers call the hard problem. How is it that anything has qualitative experiences at all? How do we know that something else has a qualitative experience? So that's how philosophers talk about it. It's not clear what the relationship is between that question and what the scientists and doctors talk about when they're like putting someone under anesthesia. I imagine your wife has lots of things to say about this sort of thing, though. My position in this debate is as a radical skeptic. So I don't think consciousness exists. I don't think that consciousness, the way the doctors and scientists talk about it is fine. The philosopher consciousness is the phrase in my head is building castles in the sky. It's a sort of problem that was concocted up by Descartes and some of the early modern philosophers before we had calculus, before we knew about really anything at all. And it's a problem that's sort of stuck in the popular imagination and culture. And it's a problem that people continue to work on today that's going nowhere. The analogy that you might recognize of a similar sort of thing is how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, right? There were theologians just before Descartes who were worried about these sort of questions, like how many angels can you stack on the pin of, head of the pin? And this is supposed to be mocking the view because it's like not a sensible question to really be concerned with. And the claim is that a lot of the discussion the philosophers have today about consciousness is just this sort of, it's not that it's an illusion, it's just sort of chasing dragons that don't exist. So this is my position. I don't think any of you are conscious. Come fight me.
But Daniel, before you hand the mic back, can you tell us why you think that? And you spoke about agency. Could you explain a little bit, 2 or 3 sentence, whatever synopsis of what that means and why you think it's more real in consciousness?
So in 3 sentences, I think agency is a mechanical phenomenon that can be understood in the same way that you're like finding perspective with a man. That I can tell that you have a different perspective than me, right? This is a mechanical, like a geometric sort of thing. And I think agency is a mechanical geometric thing where there's not really a big mystery surrounding it. The mystery is really about our social understanding, like how much the neuroscience has seeped into popular culture, how much of this vocabulary we like are comfortable talking with. And right now, the popular understanding of the mind is basically nil. And so everyone thinks there's this big mystery and there's this whole like thing, and we're all gathered in a thing to talk about it. And I think it's just I think you're all not conscious.
So they're all zombies.
No,
Hey, are you
no.
conscious? No.
This is not a thing. Yeah. I'm awake. I'm aware, but there's no quality here.
But then, you know what? So now we need to speak about this mystery of consciousness. Because you addressed it a bit, right? When you said about the hard problem, about this phenomenal consciousness, or qualia, or you see, we have lots of names for this. I, in particular, like the hard problem of consciousness. This is like the name for all this stuff. And the question is, how come I cannot find, or we cannot find out if you are conscious? Just as you said in the beginning, when I look at Daniel's brain, I will not see his experience. Now he's trying to say that he has no experience, I think, or not consciousness, but I'm pretty sure that you have right now when you see all those people, and maybe you get angry from my my views, and then of course so you have this experience of this, to be, what is it like to be angry or to see these people. But then when I will look at your brain, I will only see your brain patterns of that, some representations of what you see, what you feel maybe, but I will not find the actual experience. Like I cannot find your angriness. I cannot feel your angriness. Maybe I will find some brain pattern of that, but I always need to ask you, what do you feel right now? And only when you will tell me, oh yeah, now I feel angry, or now I feel happiness, then I will know, okay, so this pattern represents this happiness or angry or whatever, right? So for some reason, we cannot find the actual qualia, the actual experience in our brains. We can only see correlation of it, like we can see some patterns, some brain activity, but not the experience itself. And then the question is, so what exactly is this consciousness or phenomenal consciousness? We have very good evidence that it all should come from the brain. So how come we cannot find it in the brain? What is going on here, right? So this is the mystery of consciousness, or the hard problem of consciousness. And as Daniel said, until today we have lots of debates. Most of them were philosophical debates. Now it's more and more go into also in neuroscience debates, but no one has an answer for this problem until now. And Daniel thinks that it's all an illusion. I think it's not an illusion. So I see that you're like, okay, so what? So do you have an experience right now or not?
So terms like experience, these are like early modern terms that Descartes and Hume would use hundreds of years ago. So maybe the term experience is not precise enough to be compatible with neuroscience or whatever. And my claim is, well, so much for the word experience. If you want to call the thing that I'm being right now, the thing I'm doing right now, an experience, fine. If you want to call it something else, fine. The more important thing for me is understanding how it works and not whether it counts as one thing or another. And part of my problem with the qualitative stuff is that you've convinced yourself that this will-o'-the-wisp exists out there, and it's just a matter of trying to figure out how to find it and how to get our concepts to grab onto it, because it's really difficult to grab onto. And my persistent question is, why do you think there's something to grab onto in the first place? Why have you already assumed this whole infrastructure of like a subjective versus third-person experiences and so on? I was about to get into something technical in your paper, but maybe I should wait. I don't know, or open it up to questions. I'm not sure. I can keep ranting. If y'all want to hear me rant, I can do like a...
Actually, Nir, you haven't actually discussed your theory at all. Do you want to give us a quick synopsis of your theory?
Sure, but maybe before that, let's see if our audience here, do you have any questions about the hard problem, about this mystery? Do you think there is or not? Just, yeah. So no, I mean, it's easier to say, in matter of speaking. Yeah. No, Yeah. Okay. So wait. The question was: is it according to the definition of consciousness? So does it mean that we need to have two persons, let's say, in order to speak about consciousness? And it not exactly. It just mean that there should be something that is like for the creature. If there is something that is like for the creature, then the creature has consciousness. Now, again, you might ask, how do I know if the creature has something that is like? But this is something different. Just here, there is this definition of if the creature has something that is like, then it has consciousness. It's not about to have another person to ask it. It's not about actual, the actual answer. It's more about does the creature has. Yeah, so again, first of all, you can ask yourself, yeah, right? But again, I mean, I can ask someone, but I can also ask a robot or something, and someone did a code for the robot, and the robot will say, yeah, I have, right? But then it doesn't really. So the robot, let's say that our robot doesn't have consciousness. It doesn't have something that is like, right? But someone just wrote a code for him to say, yes, I have consciousness, or something like that, So then. So you see that just to ask something, it's not really. This is not what the definition was all about. The definition was about the creature itself, if it has something or not, or
If I may, for a minute, the way that it's usually stated is that, like, this basic question comes from a bat. This is where the real discussion started. What is it like to be a bat? Like, there is something that it's like to be a bat, but probably there's nothing that it's like to be a piece of dust. We can imagine that, right? So that's kind of the framework for this question of is something conscious or not? You mean a second party to measure? That wouldn't necessarily be required. But the question that Nears, I'll let Near speak to his point because he has something to say about that.
I'm not quite understanding like the rigor of that definition because like we don't know that a dust there's no thing that it's like to be a dust particle or to be a bat or to be a human. And I think the robot example is an interesting one, right? So let's say like we take a Westworld type example where we have incredibly intelligent sentient robots that are actually programmed but feel as if they're human, and they believe they are telling the truth when they say, yes, I know what it's like to be human. I'm not understanding why that wouldn't be consciousness based on the current definition of what is it like to be that robot? Because we could define what it's like to be that robot. And so then if you take that even further and you can get into, I guess, like simulation theory, we could all be that, right? Where in your example of if you were to look into his brain, you can only see like parts that spike based on different emotions he might be feeling. But that could just be a limitation of our tooling and our understanding, where you can imagine 10,000 years from now, if we know exactly how his brain works, then we could say, oh, I know in this instant he is feeling this exact feeling of pain or fear or sadness or whatever it may be. So I guess I'm not quite understanding like what the line is or what that rigor is in terms of what is it like to be something.
So actually, it's a great question because it leads us very naturally to my theory. So, but first of all, about the hard problem, something here that is important to say. Let's say that we are in the future, and we know everything about the brain, and everything about how it works and how neuron works and the patterns and everything, and still, so I can see your brain maybe. and I will say exactly what you're thinking of, right? And what you're feeling, and but still it's not the actual feeling that you have. I don't really feel what you feel. I just know to read your brain, and I understand that there is a correlation between what I see in your brain and what you feel or what you think, right? But it's not the actual, again, this experience that we are talking about. This, what is it like? It's not that. I don't feel what you feel. I don't think what you think. I just have a very good, or maybe the exact correlations between your brain patterns and your experience. But but it's still, it's not the same. If it was the same, it means that when I see patterns of your happiness, I will feel your happiness. Then I would say, okay, so now it's the same. Now I see the pattern and I actually see your happiness, right? But it will not, this is something that cannot happen. The only thing that will happen is that I can see your brain patterns and I can understand, okay, this is for you, this is happiness, right? But so there is a gap here. There is always a gap between, we call it a third person point of view, what I see when I look at your brain, and your subjective feeling, right? Your first person point of view. 1 second. So this is the hard problem. Again, it just, I said, more or less I said the same thing from a different point of view. But now, okay, you know what? Let me go to my theory a bit, because what you asked about robots, about Westworld. Would we say that the robots in Westworld, do they have consciousness? So in philosophy, they call this a zombie. So a zombie in philosophy means that it's an identical creature for humans. For example, my zombie will be identical to me, identical to my brain, and identical brain patterns and everything identical to me, but with no phenomenal consciousness. So he's like a robot, if you like, right, from Westworld or something. So you can ask this zombie near, what do you feel? And the zombie near will say, I feel happiness. But we know that he has no happiness, because this is what we decided that the zombies have no happiness, they have no consciousness. They only have these functions, but not the actual what is it like part. And this is something that is well known in the philosophy of mind. So in my theory, I wanted to show that zombies actually will also have consciousness. So for my theory, I call it the relativistic theory of consciousness. So it's about something that we call the relativistic principle. And I try to use this principle in order to show that, first of all, zombies cannot exist. If we will do a zombie, if we will do this robot, and the robot will tell us, look, I am conscious. I see now an apple. I feel that the apple is very tasty. If all this, if this robot will create all those representations and genuinely will say this thing to you, then from my theory, it means that yes, this robot has consciousness, or this zombie will have consciousness. And the reason for that is because of this relativistic principle. That means that there's nothing absolute. Everything that we measure, everything that we know, all the properties that we see, is in relation to an observer. So it's a bit like when, let's say that we are in the playa now, and we see an out car, and someone in the out car, and and the out car is just moving with constant velocity. So for me, I would say, yeah, the out car, this is the one that moves, and I am the one that is stationary. But the driver of the out car will say, no, you are wrong. All the whole world and you are moving backwards, and I am the one that's at rest. And from the physical point of view, he's correct. We cannot know who is right and who is wrong here, because it's all relative to the observer. So if I will try to do like, I don't know, measurements, I will take a ball and throw it in the air, the ball will come back to my hand. So I will know that I'm stationary, you know? But then this driver can do the same experiment. He will take, I don't know, a ball or something, throw it in the air, and the ball will go back to his hand as well. So he will say, you see, I also stationary. And it doesn't really matter which experiment we will try to do, always will have the same results. So this driver can say, yeah, I'm at rest, and you are the one that is moving. So this is relativity for you. You know, it's all about the observer, and there is nothing absolute beyond the observer, right? And then I try to say, consciousness is the same thing. It's not an absolute thing. It's something that is relative to the observer, to the measurements, and that's why in the end of the day, after some arguments, that the zombies cannot exist, because the zombie, if he or she are doing all those experiments, let's call it, and they have and they say, yes, I have consciousness. I see now, I see an apple and it's tasty. Then it means that, okay, they have consciousness. Yeah, I see lots of questions over here. The thing...
He asked, what kind of experiment could I do that would prove, or could someone do that would prove that a agent has consciousness?
Right. So think again about velocity. So when I look at the driver, I would try to prove him wrong, and I would show him, look, the ball is going straight to my hand. So you see, I am stationary. But then he will do the same thing, right? So, and we will not agree who is the one that moves and who the one that is stationary, right? So also about consciousness, you cannot prove for me that you have consciousness, because you are in a different frame of reference than I. But I only know about myself that I have consciousness. And this is exactly because of relativity, because each of us is in a different frame of reference. And because of that, we cannot agree about what we are measuring. Just exactly like, with velocity.
Daniel, I see your hand up. Did you want to comment?
I've been so good and quiet this whole time. Just fuming over here, just fuming. So just on this point about relativity, you missed the important thing about relativity in physics, which is that different frames of reference might disagree on the order of events, but there are some things that all frames of reference agree on, like the speed of light. All frames of reference agree on some things, and this is how you can resolve the apparent conflicts between observers, right? So some observers think that something happens before another. The order of events is always agreed upon, but they might, the space, there can be differences, but there are some things that all observers will agree on, like the speed of light. And I didn't see in your paper what all observers agree on that gives you this sort of focal point around. Thank you very much for the physics. Okay. It was a good example of the sort of bullshit, sort of circular reasoning spiral drain that this stuff goes down, and I don't think a lot of it is very helpful or gets us very far. So what I want to do is throw an analogy on the table that might help this group think more clearly about what's going on with the problem of consciousness, which is a hard problem, almost as hard as the problem of consciousness that we've solved, science has solved, which is the problem of life. Like what is life? How does life work? Life is this very, very complicated, extremely complicated, really beyond our imagination complicated process. But we understand how it works pretty well. In particular, we understand the chemistry of metabolism. And this is something that we've only understood for like 100, 150, maybe 100, 150 years. Before we understood the chemistry of metabolism, the Krebs cycle, this sort of thing, before that, life was a mystery, and people thought really hard about whether we could solve the problem of life scientifically, whether we could ever understand what life was. I'm not saying that all mysteries of life have been solved, but I'm saying that the mechanics, like what makes life possible, what's required for all of us to continue staying alive out here, like that stuff is understood. And it was a big leap forward in our scientific imagination to resolve this kind of thing. One of the keys to understanding how life works is to understand that we're complex systems, that we're not just one thing, we're lots and lots of different things, lots of processes that are sometimes cooperating and sometimes competing with each other. And it's this, I don't want to say balance, but it's this sort of incorporation, integration of all of these different processes working together, doing their own little roles in ways that are functionally connected to all the other things that are doing their roles. So the whole thing hangs together as a unified whole. So I don't think I'm conscious. What I do think, though, is that I'm an organism, I'm alive, and being alive is a holistic, it's an emergent property. It's an emergent property of lots of little cells that are also alive, doing their own thing, that when working together creates me, this larger organism. So this is the explanation of how life works. It used to be this big mystery that no one thought could ever be solved by science, but it turns out science solved it, and we just take it for granted nowadays. I want to say the brain works the same way. The brain is, again, a complex system, lots of functionally integrated parts, all serving each other in order to create this holistic experience that we have. What's interesting, what makes it holistic is that there's lots of different sub-processes all feeding into a common, right? So I'm not just getting sound and smell and sight, but I'm combining those into views of objects and using those in order to construct a reality, in order to construct a representation of myself, who I am, how I fit into this reality, right? All of that is constructed by the complex functional network of the brain. It's an amazing process. As amazing as life, it's an outgrowth. It's a sub process of life. And it's amazing. I'm not trying to diminish the majesty of the fact that we're all living. Like what really blows me away is thinking that there's also a continuous train of ancestors back from first life that goes all the way to me, and the same for all of you. It humbles me in a way. But I don't think that humility requires mystification. I don't think it requires treating it as something where there's these gaps that cannot be bridged, or whether there's something that cannot be resolved about it. I think the hurdle in understanding consciousness is not really anything that neuroscientists do. Neuroscientists are doing great work, but it's really about all of the rest of us getting the right concepts together so that we can talk about brains and talk about our internal conditions, our states, our cognitive states, emotional states. Talk about them in ways that are functional for us, that get us to do what we want to do better.
Okay, one second here. I want to call on this gentleman who had his hand up.
Well, if we would know what consciousness is and how can we create it, then, first of all, we can upload your consciousness, first of all, maybe into a computer or the cloud or whatever, right? And then we can also create AI with consciousness if we want. I'm not sure if we want or not, but potentially we could do it. And then the potential is so big that I'm pretty sure that we don't even know what to think about it, But it's like when they discovered the electron in 1892, I think, or something like that. The story is that what was his name? I don't remember. The physicist that discovered the electron say something like, let's toast for the useless particle. They didn't know what to do with it back then, right? And then, like 50 years later, we have electricity and everything. So I'm pretty sure we will find something to do with this knowledge of what consciousness is, right?
Wait, hold on, guys.
Yeah.
We have a question over here that's been waiting.
Okay. I'm not sure if it's human-centered. I mean, I don't really even know if you have consciousness. So the only thing that I can do is to speak about what I know, right? And it's the same for all of us. Why do I know? Yeah. Mhm. Right. And then when I look at animals, I suspect that they have consciousness as well because I see that they have a behavior that is similar to behavior that I know from myself, right? So this is why, and this is what we do with other humans and also with other animals. So, and then we think, okay, so most probably animals also have consciousness. I don't know about babies. This is a hard question still. But this is exactly why we need a theory about consciousness. So we will have a theory that will tell us like the answer, you know. So when do humans start, you know, to have consciousness? As babies, later, maybe before, maybe in the like an embryo? No, we don't know. Which animal has consciousness? Most likely, I don't know, my dog or my cat has consciousness. But what about cockroaches? I don't know, do they have consciousness? What about trees, right? So for that, we need a theory of consciousness. And if we collect only information about intelligent, let's say, about sentient, or let's say what Daniel tried to say before, this is, I think it's not enough because we still don't know about this, you know, actual lighting up. Why everything that, you know, that I do is lightened up for me. I see it. I you know, I feel it, right? And because for that we need, you know, to continue even more, you know, to actually speak about consciousness itself. Yeah.
Okay, no, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Daniel has been shaking his head. Do you want to pitch in anything?
Quickly, I want to go back to the dust. I think we can talk about not whether dust is conscious, but I think we talk about something that's like to be dust. And there's a actual example of this, which is when people are making video games graphics of dust. Like you have to model what the dust is like, how it behaves with other dust particles, and you can have a bad simulation or a good simulation. You can see a good simulation. Oh yeah, that's what dust is like. I don't see why not.
But
That's what dust is like for the dust. Is this what the I'm sorry.
yeah, I think the question would be, though, does the dust itself have an experience of what it's like to be that? And some people would argue you need some basic thing of processing and memory and things like that in order to... That I'm not drawing the line, I'm just pitching that back.
Yeah.
And we do have a couple other questions that are waiting, but please.
Just one quick example. I have something else to say, but just one quick example. Go to the question. Is when an automatic door detects you, is there something that it's like for the automatic door to detect you? Again, I don't see why not. It's a sensor. It's literally sensing the changes in light the same way that you have photoreceptive cells responding to light in your environment. It doesn't have all the rest of the machinery, but there's a sensory receptive response. I have no problem saying that. Yeah.
So let me give an example why it's not enough to be sentient, like to be active in the world, like the automatic door. It's not enough because from neuroscience we know that we can do a lot of things unconsciously. And for example, I don't know if you heard about this blind sight. So there is a very interesting neurological phenomenon. We call it blind sight. People, their eyes are, the function of their eyes is perfect, but the information from the eye cannot go all the way to the cortex, to their brain. And then, if you ask them, do you see something? They will say, no, I don't see anything. They don't have anything that is like, you know, to see. They don't have this experience, visual experience. But then, you can take them into a room and then you put some obstacles in the room and you just tell them, okay, go to the other side. And they will navigate through the obstacles. And then in the end, you will ask them, okay, did you see all those obstacles? Did you feel something? Do you know how you navigate? And they will react something like, did I just navigate? Really? I didn't see anything. So again, they have no consciousness, no visual consciousness, but still they reacted. So we can react without consciousness at all. So that's why even if I see an automatic door, it doesn't mean that it has consciousness, right? Exactly like in the blind sight example. And this is only one example. We have lots of examples how we can even solve simple mathematical equations without being consciously aware of them, for example. Yeah.
Wait.
Sorry.
We have an order of questions
Yes.
here. And Daniel, are you okay if we move on to a different question?
I mean, you're wrong about everything.
But wait, actually, before the next
No.
question.
No.
No.
Next question. She's been waiting very patiently.
Right.
Start, Daniel.
Yeah. I'm not. I don't have a lot of experience with the Eastern tradition around consciousness. What I want to say is that this model of an integrative sense of consciousness. So remember, life is a complex organized system. The brain is also a complex organized system, and we collectively, as a social system, are a complex organized system with lots of different functional parts all working together and so on. One of the issues that I have with this very Western, sort of early modern European philosophy perspective is that it's very individualistic about what consciousness is. Consciousness is something that I have, and I am a single individual with a concrete experience. And like one of the things I want to say is not motivated by the same way, but I think sympathetic with the same sort of universalist points. It's just that I'm not one thing. I'm lots of different things. So am I conscious? Well, some parts of me are. The blind sight case, there's lots of different routines going on. Some of them have access to some information from other routines, and some of them are cut off from other routines. And so you can have one system operating and doing one thing, another system operating without one hand knowing what the other hand is doing, right? And that's it's not hard to understand when you understand. Look, this is a complex system. This is not one single thing, and we need to understand how one single thing can have this behavior. This is a conglomeration of things that don't always work right, and they've got to make do with what they have. And then you get these cases like blind sight that sort of pop up. That wasn't exactly on your thing. I was trying to be sympathetic.
Well, as far as I know, okay. So your question was about this. We have those. There are those ideas of maybe there is a. We try to unify, what we know, right? We try to unify to get into a theory of everything. Let's say in physics. Usually, it means that we try to understand what is matter and how all the different particles that we see actually will come from one kind of particle. All the forces that we know in nature, how they come from an original one force that somehow breaks into these four forces that we know. And then there are some people that try to say, well, maybe somehow consciousness will be part of it. Maybe the unification of it all will go back to a field of consciousness or something like that. But from a physical point of view, I don't know about any evidence for this kind of theory that explain something like that. So until today, I didn't see anything that supports this theory. But I want to go back to something that you said. Well, you said, and you're right, that our brain is not one thing. It's a network with lots of subnetworks. Every subnetwork is doing something different. And when we see something, when I see the apple, so some part will understand the shape, maybe another part will understand the color, another part about the which not feeling, which what is it good for me or bad for me? Let's call it, what are the memories that I have about apples, and then at some point all of this will be unified into one apple, let's say. But still, all this doesn't have to be with consciousness. It can be without consciousness at all. So we need to add another layer now to explain again what is this consciousness, where does it come from, and how come, even if I take all this together, if I do all these unifications of all those small parts of the brain, in the end of the day, I will get a unified pattern, let's call it, a pattern that is a unification of all the small patterns of the patterns that represent the color, the patterns that represent the shape, and so on. And then I will have a unified pattern of that. But again, so I will look at this pattern, and I will not see the apple that you see. I will just see a unified pattern, And I need to ask you, what is this pattern? And then you will say, oh yeah, I experienced the apple. So again, we stuck with the same explanatory gap. Even though now I try to take into account, all this wholeness of the brain and all this, this emergent and everything, still it seems that it cannot really solve the hard problem, and we need something different, another thing that we cannot, we don't know what is it. That is until my theory, of course. Oh, sorry.
Okay, we have a question over here. The man with the sunglasses on his head.
Is consciousness just a mechanism of survival? And because we're like been an apex predator for so long, society and technology and all of that is like consciousness is just a metaphysical flicker of a brain.
So did you ask if consciousness was created for survival, or is it good?
But it's become instead now it's sort of, yeah, it's a source of
So, I mean, we talked about blind sight, for example, and we can think about a lot of activities that we can actually do unconsciously, but there is a limit for that. At some point we need consciousness, I guess, in order to to function well. But again, it's unclear still. I think this question is still debatable. Why do we need phenomenal consciousness? Is it part of evolution?
Daniel, do you have something to say?
The question was, is consciousness a survival thing? I guess if it was so, then we would expect all of the living things to be conscious. I guess I want that being alive does not. The statistic that's going through my head is that something like 80 or the vast majority, like 80% of the energy that a bacteria, like an E. coli bacteria, uses is used to replicate itself, and very little of it is used in self-repair. Like if there's a damaged thing, like it has some mechanisms for repairing damage, but the way that it survives is by shooting off as many copies of itself, and hopefully they survive also. And you do this efficiently enough, and you can keep replicating. You don't need any sophisticated consciousness mechanism behind that. So. Let me go back. The thing that you all should understand about how the mind works is that the mind is a machine, and that to be a machine is to have a perspective, that all machines have perspectives. So the example, just because I see it, is one of these guide wires on the tower. So it's a mechanism that's holding the thing taut. And I want to say that it has a perspective on the whole canopy. Like it's providing a certain kind of force to the canopy. The other beams are providing different forces, and the whole thing ends up staying together because of the way that those forces all combine. But that guide wire has a different perspective from the other guide wires because it's providing a different force in a different direction. And changing something about this wire is not going to change things about the other, or might do different things to the other wires because they're all different wires with a different take, like literally a take on the whole thing, right? So my view is just that being a mechanism is being a perspective. So to say that we're machines is to say that we have a perspective, and that perspective is as complicated as the machine that we are. the living bacteria is doing a bunch of mechanical things to replicate itself, and it's really replication that gives you a concrete notion of the self, because it's self-replication. If it's not the self that's being replicated, then it's not replication; it's something else. But we all replicate also, and there's a sense of our identity that's in our genetics that we give to our children and so on. But there's also a sense of identity that's a social identity, and you might not have kids, but you still have a social identity. I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Hold on one second. We have 2 more questions. So we're going to take these 2 more questions, and then we're going to give these guys a parting shot because we're almost out of time.
I want to answer one thing that they say about relativity.
30 seconds or less.
30 seconds. Okay. Just something small about relativity. You said before that I missed the speed of light, right? Something that is constant then, right? So actually, relativity is not really about that. It's true that in Einstein relativity theory, he started from 2 assumptions. One is about that, but first of all, it's about that all different observers will have the same laws of physics. They will measure the same laws of physics. And because they measure the same things, that's why we have relativity. So relativity, actually the thing that is important for relativity is that all the observers will measure the same physics or the same, laws of physics. That's why the person on the train and the person on the playa and the person on the art car, they measure the same laws, and because of that, we cannot distinguish between them, and because that we have relativity. Only then, okay, we have the speed of light as a constant, but this is not something that is essential for relativity. The essential part is the same laws of physics, and this is what I try to do in my theory. And then you can switch, you can move from one frame of reference to the other. That's it. So.
Thank you, Nir.
Sorry, yeah.
Purple vest.
So, my question circles all the way back to the very beginning. What is consciousness? I'm going to take it apart because with language, whenever I hear philosophers talk, okay, one says this, that. Somebody says, well, this exists, and then somebody says, no, this doesn't exist. The first question is, are they talking about the same thing, right? And my question is, whether or not within the discussion, the general discussion or in the community around consciousness, if the terminology is converging or diverging. If we have a divergence, then it's very difficult to actually answer questions. What is consciousness? Is this consciousness? Is it word consciousness? A bacteria that we have all in our gut. All the bazillion bacteria. Consciousness floating around. And I want to just bring it back to where the word came from. So when I woke up this morning, my eyes open, I looked around, and I was in the environment that my memory told me earlier I had been in. There was a little check, and it goes back to the memory. It says, yes, I'm in a dark space with some lights up there, like some tree lights. I got my glasses are over here, this, that. My memory told me all of that. And it clicked my current experience. Jived with the memory. It was like, bing, okay, I'm at Burning Man. I'm in an Eskimo tent. It's hot. I'm sweating. All of these things. I knew the term sweat. All this stuff that I learned. Okay, and when we all wake up, our eyes open, we say it is conscious. I am conscious. No, I am unconscious. I am conscious. I am unconscious. Like this is where the words come from. Much like we use the word peach. Tastes like peach. Does not taste like peach. We can argue that does everybody have an understanding of the word peach? Or the taste. Everybody tastes different. But when you walk into Walmart, you buy peach yogurt, you kind of get a sense that it's different than the blueberry yogurt, right? So the purpose of language in my view, as much as I love Derrida, as much as I love deconstruction, I really feel the purpose of language is to encourage to have a common understanding. And if we're not generating a common understanding, starting with the basic things that we all hopefully can agree that we more than likely, highly probably, 99.999% probable have experienced, then I don't know what to do with questions like does it exist, does it not exist, does it have, does it not have. So I was wondering if you could speak to convergence and or divergence back to philosophy.
So Daniel, why don't would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I hope divergence. I hope we break up this sort of discussion of consciousness into more concrete things that we can actually solve. So I think it's a good thing to blow it up, to burn the shit down. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, so yeah, as I said in the beginning, there is a canonical definition, more or less, that, you know, let's say, at least from the scientific point of view, in consciousness studies, so usually there is this definition of there is something that is like and all that, right? So, yeah.
Fast, because we have one more question,
Okay.
and we're out of time.
All right, yeah, so I think it is converging. That's it, yeah.
Last question. Also, thank you all for coming to camp.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep talking about sensory input. Yet if we were to remove all our senses, we'd still have your internal dialogue. Would you still be conscious at that point if you literally remove all sensory input from the brain? Because I'm trying to define consciousness based upon the sensing. Yet there's something going on in my head that I think is part of my consciousness. It has nothing to do with my senses. It's aware of them, but it's something beyond. So how does it fit in?
Okay, guys, we are absolutely out of time, and we're kicked off the stage, so I want the two of you to walk over to him right now and answer his question. And thank you, everybody. Anybody who wants to continue this conversation, come off to the side, please. Thank you very much.